Ben has agreed to join our conversation today and share their story. Ben, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. What an honor. This is my first guest speaker role. It's gone straight to my head. I'm full on guest speaker mode. I will go on.
Fantastic. That's the idea. The honor is ours. Right. So I guess the first question, Ben, would be we're talking about the stories we tell about our lives, right? Our life stories, how we feel about them, how we can transform them. What can you tell us about your own story? Just a trailer, so to speak.
Yeah, I will. I'll do my best to be brief. I have that kind of narrative that I'm sure a lot of other people here will have growing up, um, somehow different to our peers and those around you. Every day of my existence, I was made very, very aware of just how wrong it was to be who I was. And I feel that until I was 20, I really lived my life for other people. I never really saw, you know, the benefit of answering my own questions and going, yeah, that sounds great. I never really gave myself permission to be me. And it wasn't until I went to university at 21, I moved to London from a very rural place in Yorkshire, that I had my eyes opened. I suddenly, I saw a different route that was focused on saying yes instead of saying no, sort of seeing other creative queer people around me was the best thing I ever did for myself, because it really allowed me to live my life fully. And from those days, instead of every time, when you get a question in your head that says, should I do that? Before I would have gone, no, 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 you can't do that. I've just consistently said yes. I've made sure that I'm safe. I've made sure that, to the best of my ability, I'm pleasing myself. And I've just continued to say yes. And realistically, I've not looked back since. And I'm where I am today because I put my own pleasure first, which I think to the outside world is like pure selfishness. But to be honest, I believe in the spotlight theory, which is, that no one else cares about anybody else. So you putting yourself first does no one else any harm, and is really where my journey starts and where my journey will continue to grow from.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you. I was wondering, you just talked about the sort of journey into the university level, and from what I understood, that's where sort of your eyes opened and you thought, oh my God, these other stories are possible. Could you tell us a bit more about how that impacted you? What did it feel like? How were those other stories sort of opening up new paths for your own story?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I was in my very early 20s, and I feel like I'd not had my teenage years. My teenage years were lost, to bullying, to misery, to sadness. And when I got to uni, it's one of those things. It's not like you're playing somebody else, but also you're being yourself without your history. You go to the same school, you grow up with the same people. Everyone knows everything that ever happened to you, and you're stuck in that past. But when you go somewhere new and a new set of people, you have the option just to filter what's gone behind. And you get to present everything you love about yourself, and the bits of your past that maybe held you back before, you just don't talk about them as much, right? And that allows you to say, I'm this confident new person. And seeing other people also going through that metamorphosis, I suddenly just started doing things that I never would have done. And I remember, for me, in terms of visual identity and sort of my gender identity, it was looking at clothes as being genderless. And I remember buying these wide leg trousers from the women's section. And looking back now, they're the most boring things ever. But at the time, it was like lights came down on me. I just felt like this is the best thing I ever did. And sometimes we look back and think, well, that really wasn't that monumental. But at the time, that small change, that small question answered, unlocked so many other things that would come forwards to me that I would continue to accept and evolve into, because I made that first change. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't push myself out of my comfort zone. I remember I really didn't want to go to university at the first time. And when it came to 21, I still really didn't want to. But I knew if I didn't change, nothing else would change. And I think that really is a really good explanation of why sometimes risk is really, really healthy for us and why we should say yes more often.
Absolutely. I was thinking that, well, we've been talking about creativity. So what you were saying of sort of this exploring these other clothes, and do you think that was a way of being creative yourself, and sort of a way of using creativity to reconnect with yourself in different ways, or?
Yeah, visual identity is really, really important. I think mainstream society really, really loves to say that, clothes, makeup, sort of accoutrements that we put on top of our bodies are vanity, are, not worth anything. But when I speak to younger people in the queer community, when I speak to older people in the queer community, there's always that conversation about the way we dress, the way we present ourselves, that offer us steadfastness and security because it's a part of who you are. And on days when I'm feeling a bit wobbly or a bit questioning, reconnecting with myself via my wardrobe is really, really healthy. And sometimes it takes putting a full face of makeup on to sit down at my desk to go, I'm in the zone to be me. And everything flows from there. And I would say that accessing that creative visual side unlocks the creative side inside of me. And it's almost like on dark days, or for example, yesterday was Trans Day of Remembrance, was a really, really difficult day for me personally, but for the community as well. Having that comfort of my own identity to sink back into was really, really healthy to connect me with my thoughts and my feelings. And I was able to reflect upon that because I had this visual strength for me. And I know that's quite an odd concept to understand, but if you just let these things permeate into your head a little bit more, it will begin to help you.
Mhm. Wow. Okay. I like the way you talked about visual identity. I think it's very, very deep. It is very interesting. And for some people, I guess it could be visual identity. To some people, it might be like the way they talk about themselves or the way they talk. I don't know. Let's talk a bit about risk, which is the upcoming theme. Yesterday, yeah, I saw a small monument here in Oxford in front of the library. There were flowers and there was the trans flag, and there were sort of signs talking about the people that have been victims. It is a risk, and the LGBT community, there's risks everywhere. What were your risks? I mean, which were the risks that you took? Both, maybe two questions. The risks you took when that sort of transformation started to happen, when you were sort of beginning to explore creativity, and the risks that you take today on a daily basis.
In terms of my journey at the time of self-discovery, my risks were really putting my true self on display. For so many years, I'd hidden away behind what other people thought of me, and I'd put up walls. And so this was the first time I'd ever been myself around people that I loved and around new people. And, especially family, they suddenly feel like they don't know who you are anymore. They think this change has occurred overnight and you've taken yourself away, and it scares them and it upsets them. And when other people are frightened, they put that fear on you and they try and shift that uh, lack of understanding into discourse that you have hurt them. And I think that risk is something that I take on board every single day. Every time I meet someone new, every time I go into an environment that I do not feel safe, that is, something especially for the trans and non-binary community that we face every single day. But I talk about this a lot. We have to distance ourselves from that feeling because those are other people's problems and not our problems. Now, I cannot take the sting away of the pain that other people cause, but when you know it's not as personal, it is easier to deal with. And so that's one way that
Absolutely.
I've moved forwards with. And then in terms of risks that I take every day, I create content online. I'm quite vocal. I'm quite challenging to a lot of people, and it does cause difficulties for me. Just a trigger warning. I do deal with death threats weekly. I do deal with a lot of hate on Twitter, DMs and emails that are just vile, that no one should have to deal with. But I do it because I know that just being visibly present online could unlock the future for someone else. And I'm in a place where I'm strong, I'm comfortable, I'm confident. I can deal with those things. And my risk will help the next generation face far less risk. And it also pays it back to, you know, the communities that our community is built upon and the risk they gave to us. You know, I think 90% of our self should be for ourselves. But when you are in a place of comfort and confidence, you do owe it to the community to pay it back. But, you know, that's just a little bit off topic. But
yeah, no, it was beautiful. And I love the fact that, I mean, you started talking about the spotlight and talking about, you know, focus on yourself. And I totally agree with that. But it's interesting that you also talked about others and, you know, the risk that others might take in the future generation. So in a sense, you're not just thinking about yourself. I mean, my point is that there's no contradiction between what truly answers to you and what truly helps others. I think that's very interesting. I mean, it's clear that you finding yourself and sort of focusing in who you are definitely will have a positive impact in other people. And I think that's amazing. I think it's very, very beautiful.
no, that's,
Um,
yeah.
so you think those risks are worth taking?
Those risks are worth taking for me now.
Uh-huh.
But if you were at the beginning of that journey,
Mhm.
those risks are not worth taking. And I think
Mhm.
that's where you split apart the spotlight and you
Mhm.
split apart caring for other people. I
Mhm.
think when you are at the start of a journey and you've taken that step away from what you know, you've taken that risk, there's a lot of variables. And I think in order to provide solace and comfort, minimize those variables. So take less massive leaps and take smaller steps. And eventually, when you look back, you'll realize that you did take big risks, but they didn't feel like that at the time. And I think we have to put our safety first. You know, as a
Of course.
community, the LGBTQ plus community, we are still very marginalized. And as far as we go, with one foul swoop, it can all be taken away from us. And where would we be then? And that's when you go back to, you did what you did for you, and there was a reason behind it. I think what might be contradictory is that I didn't know where I was going at the time, but I'm here today doing everything that I love, creating podcasts, creating stories, being present on social media, writing my first book. I think somewhere deep down, that's where I wanted to go. Had I vocalized it at the beginning, had I written those things down, I might have got here a little bit quicker because I
Mhm.
think I've got confused in the past. So I think, you know, we can be scared to put things on paper, to write things down, to say it out loud because we're like, well, what if it never happens? But if you put it down at the start and then you do it, you'll look back and go, I've done it. And that sense of achievement will really nourish your soul. And that's why risk is really important.
Mhm. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for everything you've told us. Yeah, definitely tons of creativity and risk taking there as well. So yeah, thank you for your story. Thank you for being strong, and thank you for being with us today. Right. So I think we have a little break now. So if anyone needs to sort of stretch out a bit, make